I'm going to read you one verse that we just, from the reading we heard earlier. He brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love. We're starting a new series, so for those of you who are visiting us or here for the first time, we're fairly run-of-the-mill church in one sense. Anything distinctive about us, I guess you may have seen. So we sing songs that other churches will sing, whether they're psalms or older or newer hymns. Also, we work through passages of the Bible, sort of books of the Bible, and that means anything is fair game, including this one. So we're doing a new series on the book of Song of Songs, and I'll use that phrase, Song of Songs, rather than Song of Solomon. We'll see why later in the series. And the reading may have surprised you, but there it is. It's in the Bible. It's a part of God's Word. Thank you. I'll need that later. And so it's useful for us. God's Word tells us that all of God's Word is useful. So how is this useful? I mean, it may be, if you were thinking it, I'll put the words in your mouth. It was a bit racy in places, and it will get more so, but appropriate and age-friendly. And I've been told if you want to get students in your church, if you want to get young adults, do a series on the Song of Songs for the simple reason, sex sells, and they'll all come along. And honestly, like I said, it is a bit racy in places. But if you've come for that, or if you think, great, this is the church for me, I'm now going to disappoint you. The book is actually about Jesus. And for that fact, it is better for it. Now, it's odd book. The word the Lord is mentioned once in the very end of the book. And that depends on your translation. In some translations, it's not even mentioned because there's some debate over that. Some rabbis still say that no one should read the Song of Songs until they're 30. I've heard other people say by then it's too late. You need it before then. So if you think, well, it's a bit weird. If we just take the plain meaning of the Bible, as we should, how is this about Jesus? And I'm going to give you 4 reasons. I think there are others, but the 4 big reasons for me, and each one becomes more persuasive. So we'll start with the least persuasive and move up. So, all my friends said so. Now, what I mean by that is not people that I know around me, but that would be silly. But through the years, through the centuries, God's people have taken this to be about God. The Jews taught that this was about the love between God and Israel. And Christians have always taught that it's about Christ and the church. And this has always happened until the 1960s and the sexual revolution. And then it's about human love, specifically the physical aspect of it. So I'll give you an example of how this has always been the case before the 60s. Between the 4th and 11th century, we've got some Latin commentaries of the Bible. And of the ones that we have, there are 6 on the book of Galatians, 4 on the book of Romans, and 32 on this. The church was really interested in this. Some of the Puritans spent decades working their way through this. We're going to do it in 5, if you're worried that we'll do this until your retirement or something. Because everyone says something is right, doesn't make it right. But it is worth listening to them. So that's one reason. Another reason is the title, the Song of Songs. In Hebrew, if you say the something of the something, it means it's the best. So God is called the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings. The center of the temple was called the Holy of Holies. That's where you actually met God. In fact, many Jewish scholars refer to this book as the Bible's Holy of Holies. It is here that you most meet God, they say. So this is claiming to be, at the first verse, it's claiming to be the best song ever written. The best song ever written. I heard an interview with, back probably in the 80s, with the band Wet, Wet, Wet. And I have that effect on some people. And if you are, even if you're bigger, if you need a creche, you can use that as well, which is over in there. So Wet, Wet, Wet said, someone asked, how long will you keep going? And they said, we will retire when we've written the best song ever. Well, they've retired, so I don't know if they thought they did that. But it's saying, if it's saying it's the best hymn ever, it's saying it's better than any hymn that anyone's written. It's better than any psalm that's in the Bible. Now, we don't have the tune, but we just have the words. But if that's true, wouldn't that be odd to put in the Bible if it's about human love? If it's saying that human love is the ultimate thing and making ourselves the subject over God's. So there's another reason. Here's another reason. It's we might say Bible pictures. Technical word, biblical theology. So if you read the Bible right the way through, there is a story. The Bible holds together as a whole. And within it, there's repeated themes. And one big theme in the Bible is marriage. And the Bible has lots to say about marriage. It starts and ends with a marriage. But as well as talking about marriage, it refers to God in terms of marriage. So it says that God is the husband of, in the Old Testament, God is the husband of Israel. In the New Testament, it's Christ is the husband of the church. So human marriages are good, lots we can find out from the Bible from it, but they point beyond itself, beyond themselves. So just as we talk about God as Father and us as his Son, so Jesus is the husband and we are the bride. So that's not about hidden meanings and allegory, which is popular in the Middle Ages, but the Bible gives us a framework which makes links between other bits of the Bible. So as we continue through Song of Songs, we'll notice how it changes. So someone said this, it starts as a song about a girl and it ends up as a song about a garden. And as we look at some of the compliments, particularly that he makes to her, imagine this on a date. I've been married for 26 years, and so a long time since I've had a date as such, trying to woo someone. I've done it now. But imagine me trying to woo the woman that's now my wife and said, I love you. You are beautiful. You've got all your own teeth. They look like sheep. And your face is the face of a horse. I probably wouldn't be married. It would have been my last date. But that's what we get here. And so as we go through, the song gives us these images where they give each other compliments, but they become more and more compliments of the land and God's blessings in the land. So that's another reason why I think it's about Jesus. And here's another reason, which is probably the most persuasive, is Jesus said it's about Jesus. So if you remember, after the resurrection, Jesus is walking with two disciples to Emmaus, and he tells them all of the Old Testament is about him. He says the law, the prophets, and the writings, which is basically what we call the Old Testament. And the song is in the writings. So this is a book about Jesus, but it is a song. It is not, and Ben alluded to this, it's not a dictionary article about love. You know, you can look up dictionary love, it means this. It's not a set of facts. It's not a story. It's not a letter. So we read it differently, and that is the way into it and to get the benefits from it. So you may be feeling, particularly, I know some of you are students at ALU, some of you, at least one of you is a mechanical engineer student. You might be thinking, I did civil engineering, what's the answer? I don't want to do all this lovey-dovey stuff, just give me the answer. But you miss it if you do that. So we need to feel the human aspect of love and desire, and then we see the wisdom for relationships, whatever our situation, if you're single or married or divorced or widowed, if you're friends, hopefully you're friends with people, relatives. But ultimately, it points us to Christ and his love for us and the love he wants to draw from us. So I've given the sermons a title. So I've given this one the title, You're Beautiful, a song by James Blunt. I could have done some other ones, but you'd be humming the tunes. So it's about Jesus' beauty and the beauty he finds in you. And you might find that strange, but we'll tackle that in a second. So the first thing is that the beauty that you see in the world. We have a capacity to see beauty and to desire things. So we see this especially in the first 4 verses and chapter 2, 3 to 7. And here it's mostly about physical desire. So it's not lost on me. From verse 2, if you swap the middle letters around in English, you have the snog of snogs, is what she's talking about. So she, this young lady, is in love with a man and she wants him to kiss her. And by kiss we mean proper kissing her and more. She wants more from him than a kiss in verse 4. And the whole image fills our senses. So she says, your love is better than wine. She talks about his fragrant oils and he smells nice. So Any young single men here, note, women have more sense of smell than us. Let the reader understand. His name is like oil poured out. Now, I heard some while ago there was this research where even people who've been married for many years, their heart goes up slightly. It beats slightly faster when they hear their other half on the phone. I don't know who does this research or how they do it, but apparently so. That even just hearing their name or their voice makes you slightly more excited, even unnoticeably to yourself. And something like that happens in verses 3 to 7. She likens him to a fruit tree. So it's pleasant to look at. It's strong, and she tastes the fruit, and she is refreshed as she sits in his shade. And there's this image of him being sort of this strong thing that protects her in her shade. So it's pleasant, but also love is unpleasant in verse 6. Verse 6? No. I've forgotten where I found it, but it talks about his about absence and your heart longing for. There he is in verse 5. I'm sick with love. Maybe you've had that experience when your loved one is away and you feel sick for them. It is bad to be apart. But again, she wants more. She wants an embrace. So it's sickening to be apart. What the best case for her is for them to be physically holding on to each other. She admires him. She desires him. And not to put too fine a point on it, to use the technical theological word, she fancies him. But there are limits to that desire. Verse 7, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the does of the field, that you do not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. So whatever our situation, love and acting on love and desire has limitations. That phrase is repeated through the book, so we're actually going to come back and consider that properly another week. But there are limitations to how we express our feelings and where and when that should happen. But notice the emphasis in these verses is our capacity for desire, including sexual desire. Yes, there are limitations, but it is a good thing by itself. It's interesting, Ben mentioned Adam and Eden. The fruit that was mentioned was a fruit of no in a farm of yes, in a garden, in a forest of yes. There's lots of things that God says, yes, desire this, but here's a no. We focus on the no and how unreasonable he is, but he's given us a lot of yes. So we're going to see that this desire, all desire for good things, for physical relationships, for food that's good, for wine, for beautiful views, to listen to great music, they're all shadows that are derived from Christ himself. That's not to mean those things are a waste of time. They're there to be enjoyed, but they are signposts that go beyond themselves to where beauty comes from. And you're sort of missing the point if that's where you end. So it's not wrong to desire intimacy. You are made, you're physically put together for intimacy, but actually it doesn't fully satisfy. Not for long, because it only reflects something bigger, which is intimacy with Christ. But we have to come and see that those other desires, when they're met, we find actually they don't really meet our desires. So, are we beautiful to Jesus? First, I want us to think about that question, and then I want us to think about how he does find us beautiful. So firstly, think about how do I think about that question? How do I feel about my insecurities? Every year, across the world, millions of pounds, probably a lot more than millions, is spent on our appearance. That's men as well. Clothes, makeup, and nowadays that's men as well. Plastic surgery. I don't like the way I look, so I'll just alter it. And especially the case for women, but it's true for men. You may have seen the Dove ads, which challenges the idea of what conventional beauty is. And maybe you've seen those time-lapse pictures that start sort of from the Victorian period, go up to today, and they show you the fashion of what a woman should look like, which is bizarre, isn't it? I've got unfashionable hands. I didn't have a lot of say in them. But we have unfashionable looks. You know, certain heights are fashionable. It's bizarre. But it's not just looks, is it? Maybe you feel inadequate or been made to feel inadequate in your job. Maybe your boss gaslights you. So you feel maybe I'm not competent to do this. School left me feeling pretty insecure. There were people always brighter and quicker than me. Maybe you feel insecure before God. We see here in the song, the woman is insecure. She's insecure about her appearance. So in verses 1 to 7, she refers to herself as dark but lovely. Like that's a surprise that you can be both dark and lovely. And now many cultures, particularly in this era, people who are naturally more brown, the lighter brown you are, in a lot of cultures, particularly then, is deemed more beautiful. Now, it used to be the case in this country. You look at sort of pre-First World War, it's fashionable to be not just, I don't have much colour, saying the colour of my skin, but to be white is more desirable, to be really white and pale. But more recently, to have a tan is more fashionable because it shows you can go on holiday. And then you start realising how ridiculous these things are. But she gives a reason for why she sort of makes an excuse for her appearance. She says there's no dad that's mentioned, but she mentions her mother's sons. So these are not her brothers. These are probably a step family. So they're not caring for her. Rather, what they're doing is they're sending her out to do the hard labour. And so end of verse 6, she's in the fields, but she doesn't tend her own vineyard. In other words, she's not looking after her own appearance. Chapter 2, verse 1, I am a rose of Sharon in the lily of the valley, a lily of the valleys. Now, the footnote gives you other flowers' names like crocuses. This is our equivalent of, I don't think rose is the right word. It's like we have a daisy. So pretty enough, but in spring across Israel, these little flowers would be everywhere. So she's comparing herself with his handsomeness and stature, and she's saying, I'm the girl next door. I'm unremarkable. You wouldn't pick me out from a crowd. She's insecure, and she's especially insecure before him. Now, have you ever wondered this? Why is God bothered with me? Now, it's true that we're sinners, and if you didn't know that, you are a sinner. And so there's nothing remarkable or special about you in that respect. We also know that God saves sinners, and that's why we call it good news. But then we think, yes, but there's nothing worth saving about me. Well, there's good news. How does God view you? Well, he does desire us. In fact, she is beautiful to him, and that is all that matters. Now, a couple of times, inevitably, I'm going to embarrass my wife. So I just started dating Glad. I was in a shopping mall with a friend of mine, and this woman walked past, and a few eyes followed her as she went. And my friend commented on this woman's beauty, and my reply was, meh, my girlfriend's prettier. And his reply was, meh. Yes, you've got the prettiest girl in southwest London, and that's why we hate you. Look at how he replies to her. So she says, I'm the girl next door. I'm an also-ran. His reply in verse 2, so she's saying, I'm just a lily among brambles. So is my love among the young women. Look at how it's repeated so saying, you're saying I'm an everyday flower. You're like a flower amongst weeds. And then at 1:14, my beloved in 15, behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. Your eyes are doves. So you get it, don't you? You're saying you are beautiful. It doesn't actually matter what you think, but to me, you are beautiful. Despite what she thinks, he wants her anyway. How beautiful is she? Verses 8 to 10, she's so good looking, she looks like a horse. Verse 9, I compare you, my love, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariots. Like I said, can you imagine that on a date saying, we went to the zoo, that's what you remind me of. Now, like I said, I've never said that on a date. Maybe something's been lost here from cultural differences. Maybe, 3,000 years ago in the Middle East, this would be more flattering. But the part of the point, I think there's a few things here. Part of the point is that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. If you are in love with this person, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks they look like, just what you think they look like. It does not matter. So there is such a thing as good looks in the Bible, and then we're not told what that is. It is what you think it is. It's like the John Legend song. He sings, all of me loves all of you, and then he adds all your perfect imperfections. It's like some people say this. I'm not normally this embarrassing, but might say things like, I'm really embarrassed about my nose, about my bum. And their other half goes, what? That's your best bit. That's what it's talking about here. You're saying you look like a horse. And actually, what he's starting to do, and this cranks up as we go through the book, both of them do this, is they start to describe each other in ways we think are pretty weird. It's about the blessings of the land. Now, attraction is right and good, but it points beyond itself. When we do, as the woman does here, we consider Christ, we start to think about the source of all beauty. We think of him as absolute power, and that power that's used in absolute good, and we think about his moral perfection. And what do we bring to the table? A nice personality? No. We bring sin to the table. Now, sure, not everything we have done is horrible, but the more we see Christ, the more we feel inadequacies, the more we see our limitations and our sin. We might think we're sinners, but we see Christ, we see more that we are sinners. There are things about ourselves that we don't want to share with anyone else. We don't want them to know. They won't be our friends anymore. We have our deepest, darkest thoughts. There are moments that we look back on our lives and our actions and thoughts and we wince. And Jesus says, you are beautiful to me. How can he say that? Given what we know about him from the rest of the Bible, he is perfect, he hates sin, and sin needs to be dealt with. How can he say that? How can he desire you or me? Martin Luther said this, Christ loves what he puts in us, which is his own image. I'll say that again. Christ loves that which he put in us, which is his own image. So the Bible often talks about God or Christ preparing his bride that makes her beautiful and washes her so that she is acceptable, that the sin has been washed away from her. Now, normally, think about this. When you go to a wedding, is the bride does that all for herself. She might go to a hairdresser. The bridesmaids sort of fuss around her. But she pretty much does it herself and with a bit of help from her friends. But here, the groom makes the bride beautiful. Christ died for his bride, and he imputes to her, that means he credits with her, or he clothes her with his goodness. So, no, she wasn't beautiful, but he makes her beautiful and then goes, I desire her. He desires you. He put into you that which he desires. Now notice he doesn't make clones. As we become more like Christ, and lots of the Bible talks about him making, the Holy Spirit making you more like Christ, the more he does that, you don't become more like each other. Over time, you become more yourself. So here's the one the one person, although he is the person you are most different from, because he is most perfect, he's also the one you don't have to feel insecure around. Now, the Bible sometimes uses this word naked. You know what that means? You've probably had the nightmare when you're somewhere and you're naked. It usually uses it negatively, that it means being vulnerable and exposed. You know, only a husband and wife should see you that way. The only person you'd want to see you that way, if them. Jesus always sees you that way, in the sense there is no pretense before him. There is no cover-up before him. And yet he died for you. So whatever you've thought or done or been, he wants you. And notice that he tolerates you. So rather, he doesn't just tolerate you. He doesn't just make you acceptable, but he desires you. I think this is the distinct note we get in the song. It's not just how does he get you right, but that he desires you. He wants you. He wants to know you better, more deeply, more closely. Now, I said I embarrassed my wife a couple of times. Here's the last time today. Not last time ever, but the last time today. When we started dating, I'd often be late. Now, if anyone knows me reasonably well, we know what being late effect has on me and how angry that makes me. So I've talked about this to do with cultural differences. 99% of life I don't care about, but if you are late, I assume you hate me, and I will be angry. I will cover it up pretty well, but I don't like, and worse than you being late is me being late. All right, I don't like being late. When I first started dating Glad, I was perennially late. And the reason is this. I've got 10 minutes to go to a lecture. We met in university. 10 minutes to go to a lecture. It takes me 6 minutes to get to the lecture. It takes me 6 minutes to get to Glad's house, which is in the opposite direction. That leaves me minus 2 minutes. I think I can do it. Why? It's ridiculous. Why would I do that? Well, because you want to spend time with the people that you love. Now, if you are married, then maybe that's something, it's really obvious, but something we neglect and need to rediscover. We talk about quality time, but where do we get quality time from? It comes from quantity time. You can't substitute it. Jesus is itching to spend time with you, and he has more than enough time for you. Now, this applies to you, whoever you are. Maybe your marriage has ended by divorce or death. Either way, sad. Or you're single. You don't want to be. Jesus is not the consolation prize. He is the whole thing. He's what it's all about. What about the smug marrieds? They get both. Well, they're actually in great danger. The great danger is that you can be so absorbed in each other that you miss what it actually is all about, which is actually shortchanging both of you. This is the song of songs, not James Blunt, but a bit better. Jesus looks at you in a way that nobody else looks at you, and he desires you. As much as anyone has experienced or expressed desire before, he wants you to know him. And so the application is pretty obvious, isn't it? Get to know him. Get to know him better, or come to meet him for the first time. There's some flyers at the back about things that we do at church, and one of them is Christianity Explored. Ask Ben a bit more about that. He usually runs that at his house, and to think about how do we get to know this God better. Now, I want to close with a story that some of you would know. It's a pretend story about Betty the botanist and Larry the lab tech. And what happens is Larry goes in to see Betty and he goes, "Do you have what I left you?" And she said, "Thank you, I do. I'm very pleased with it. I've been working on it all night. I've put it under the microscope. I've run the chemical analysis. I've looked at the, it was such a good biological organic specimen. I've run the genome on it and a full DNA sequence. I think actually it may help research going on at Cambridge University to solve our problems with Alzheimer's. I'm very excited, so thank you very much. I haven't even been to bed. I'm so excited by the specimen that you gave me." And Larry replies, "Betty, it was a rose. Yesterday was the 14th of February. See, Betty has got PhDs and Nobel Prizes, and she's an idiot. There are people, some of us here, who can understand the world and look at science and art and analyze it, but miss the invitation. Betty's an idiot. Don't be Betty." Let's pray.